first of all, to be here. And I'm really just so grateful that I've been in the residential real estate industry. I, like a lot of people, accidentally ended up in real estate. But I will also say that I studied business in school. So I've always been interested in business. And I've always been interested in real estate. I remember even as a small child, and I was in a small town, my parents, we would walk around the neighborhood and we would always walk into homes that were being constructed or open houses. And so I always knew I liked real estate, but when I got out of school, I ended up in the medical field. And I loved the medical field too, but I ended up at a ceiling of performance, and like I didn't feel like I was going to get to the next place in my career. And so ironically, I ended up relocating to Dallas, Texas. And my brother-in-law, so speaking of networking, my brother-in-law actually introduced me to a gentleman in Dallas. And he happened to be the son of the owner of the Dallas region for Keller Williams Realty. And so it was the first region being built outside of Austin, Texas. And so that's how I started my real estate career. Is I ended up having lunch with this guy completely out of the blue. And before I knew it, he had offered me a job to go to work for him. And so I completely changed my career, not knowing that that would literally change the trajectory pretty much of my entire life by going to work for Keller Williams and then ending up at Keller Williams Realty International. So that was sort of the first step in, you know, whatever has been 20, 25 years, I don't know, maybe more, but of a real estate career. So.
Yeah. And you started as a real estate agent, or what were you doing in that brokerage?
Yeah, well, great question. I always say, interestingly enough, I feel like I lived my life backwards because I had an executive career already by the time I met this gentleman in Dallas. And so we started opening real estate offices in Dallas. And I want to say, I'd have to check my facts, but I mean, we probably opened 10 offices in maybe 2 years in the Dallas market. And that's how I ended up meeting Gary Keller, because at the time he was still going around teaching classes as a way of recruiting agents in the different markets, because they were barely leaving outside of Austin. They were just moving into the Dallas market. And so anyway, I ended up going to work for Gary Keller and Mo Anderson here in Austin, Texas, to basically start and launch Keller Williams University, because at that time, there was not a Keller Williams University, which is hard to believe because it just seems like it's the fabric of not only Keller Williams, but I believe the foundation for really the first national training coaching platform within the industry that has really serviced the agents and the broker owners and everyone within and without that system, with the Millionaire Real Estate Agent book being a really big part of that at one point. So yes, I was not a real estate agent until I was in the business probably, 10 years.
Oh, wow.
Isn't that wild?
Yeah, that is crazy. No, because another thing that makes so much sense, it like puts the KW story, it solidifies it, if you will, for me. Like it makes it the pieces, it puts it together.
Yes,
and when you said that Gary Keller, like his way of recruitment was teaching real estate agents how to be $1 million producers, and which then leads to his book. And then isn't KW, like, aren't they right now like leading in not only agents across the world, but also transactions across the world?
That's a great question. I think it depends on, whatever source you're looking at. So depending on who's reporting what numbers. But, interestingly, when I started at Keller Williams, there was literally, I want to say, I don't know, 10-inch manual of pages that were, drawings, really. Like Gary would get these drawings out of his head and he would write all this stuff down. It was unbelievable, really. And then he would take this huge manual out and he would go into the markets and teach how to build businesses. Right. And then all of that evolved into, how do you build a 7th level real estate business, which, I still feel like that's the preeminent guide to building a 7th level real estate team. And the formation of the original team concept So when I look back at that, it's just fascinating to think that the evolution of all of that, and just seeing how someone of Gary Keller's CEO, owner, entrepreneur mindset, how that worked out. I was at such a young age, but I was very influential. So I feel like, my career has been a direct byproduct of the learning that I did in that probably first 5 years of my career in the residential real estate industry because of him.
Yeah, you must have got so much experience just seeing that and witnessing that. Like you said, all the drawings and diagrams that he's writing when it comes to, developing businesses. It's quite interesting. Did you ever were you ever like in meetings with him, and were you that close to him?
Yeah, he was my direct boss.
Oh, nice.
So we would do these 411 meetings. The 411 is a tool. So that was probably the other major influence on me, was learning how he structured his time and how he did time blocking. And then we would use the 411, and the goals would come from the top. So like they'd have a company 411, and then all of our goals were translated into, my role as a leader, and for myself, and then for my team, they were all translated down. I mean, it was really so brilliant. I've never really had the opportunity to work in another environment like that before, where when you start at the top, it's all aligned, coming all the way down the organization, because it comes from the top in the vision, and they have a way of structuring that. But I became just a sponge of learning about how to time block long before people were talking about time block and behavioral tools, and learning how to recruit and how to hire and organizational development, and all of these key things, because there weren't that many employees. And so it was kind of like, just give me whatever and I'll do it. And so, yeah, I mean, I just can't even begin to describe like how much I've learned in that organization from having that opportunity, which then catapulted me into sort of going out on my own. And so I've been in and out of entrepreneurship and intrapreneurship. And I think part of, I'm discovering now in my journey that that's been a critical thing for me, is I was fundamentally looking for the knowledge that I would need to get to the next place that I wanted to go in my career. I don't know that I could have articulated it like that back then, but when I look back now, I just knew that there was knowledge that I needed in order to get to the next step. And so one of those things was, working and launching a real estate brokerage with a group of partners. And at that time is when I then started actually selling real estate, but I was selling real estate as a way of informing the systems that we were building. And this was 2008, when sort of lifestyle marketing and the internet was really evolving. And so, we were setting up paperless systems and a paperless office. And so I was selling real estate, so I could come back and say, okay, this is how we need to teach our agents how that they need to perform digitally, because the tools were just evolving, like an iPad, where you could actually do a CMA on your iPad, and we could actually start to do some digital signatures. And, so we were learning all of those things and designing an organization around it at the same time. So I feel like for me, it's just been a matter of, what do I need to learn next to go to the next phase of my career?
Yeah. And excuse me, so at that next phase, so sorry, so you went from, it is interesting how you went backwards.
Yes.
So like you went from you went from developing real estate offices to being a real estate agent. And then, I'm sorry if I missed it, you said you were missing a piece of knowledge to take your career to the next level. What was the next level that you were aiming towards? And then what was the knowledge needed to get there?
Yes. Great question. I somehow, and this may not have been true, but it might have just been my own limited belief. I don't know. But when I was at Keller Williams, and I'm not saying this was a thing about Keller Williams, I think it was just me, that I felt like I needed to practice real estate to some degree in order to understand, even though I really did feel like I understand the agent, but to really understand what they would go through. And so that was sort of the next piece of it. And then I wanted to build my own business, which was how I ended up in that partnership, building a brokerage business, and thinking that that was going to be the next evolution of my career, was some kind of a business building within the residential real estate industry. But being an agent and doing some practicing of being an agent was important to me.
Interesting. Yeah. To get the perspective of the real estate agent and everything they go through in
Yes.
order to provide them everything that they need in order to have a successful business, which then grows your business, the brokerage.
Yes. And
Yeah.
understanding what it really is like to, sit at the dining room table with the seller and have those conversations. How do you actually produce value for them? What do you say? How do you do it? And then learning it on the other side with a buyer. So, what do you do for buyers that's valuable, and how do you articulate that? And, I deeply care about like my clients. And I knew that as an agent, for me, I'm like, this is the largest transaction that someone normally does in their lifetime. And it's actually the pathway to wealth building and leaving a legacy. And I don't know the statistics, you might know them, Cameron, of, there's such a higher percentage of people that build wealth that own real estate compared to those that do not. And so I did really love working directly with buyers and sellers because I really felt like I could really help make an impact in their lives.
Yeah. 100%. Interesting. This is kind of like and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but
That's okay. You can ask me
this is,
anything.
yeah, this is just me being super curious. Was there anything that you were doing that was different? Because I completely understand, and I completely understand these real estate agents too, the ones that were like you, that in the sense that they're like, I want to do everything that I can to take care of my home buyers and sellers. And so was there anything that was from a practical perspective that you were doing different, whether it's like a piece of technology, a certain niche that you were like, people who are looking to upgrade or whatever it is there anything that you were doing different that was helping you stand out in your market?
Yes. And I'll say this, it's very interesting. There are a lot of things that we were doing that were innovative in the brokerage. So we could spend a lot of time talking about that. I'm happy to do that. But one thing in thinking about this conversation is, so think about it, was the year 2008 to probably 2013. So it's like a 5-year period where, as you know, we were going at the beginning, it was the market was okay. And then we went through a market crisis, if you will. But one of the things that we were teaching and that we did in 2008, which when I look back, it's really surprising. We were already doing hyper local niche marketing. And what I mean by that was very different. And I still feel like it can be a competitive advantage now if you do this. Not that many agents do it, and it's because it's not as easy to do as you think. And that is, how do you know a specific geographic area so well? Like, I used to know every home that came on the market. I had seen every home. I live in a neighborhood now, and I can't not do it anymore. Even now, I mean, I know all of the inventory in my neighborhood. I know how much every house is sold for. Mostly I know who sold what to whom, and I'm in the neighborhood gossip, and I know what's going on in the schools. But we would train our agents on how to know very targeted, specific geographic areas, so that when someone came to us, we were it wasn't online at that time the way that it probably is now. Like, it kind of existed in 2010, if you think about it, but not as much. And so we were trying to establish expertise in our agents in order to take care of the clients. So we literally had a program where we'd have our agents go out and interview the business owners in their local market areas and write blogs and do videos. And because when you're in the restaurant and you're talking to the owner, right, you're sitting at the coffee shop and you're talking to the owner, you know everything that's going on. And not only is that then a referral business, we also then were like, okay, when you go to talk to the business owner at the coffee house and you're standing in line and someone says, hey, how's the real estate market? Do you know what to say then? Because that you can convert someone into a referral in that moment, or a relationship that ultimately can help you continue to build and refine your business. And so I think about it now, even, and here's something that people don't believe, but in our brokerage, we actually, and this was probably the year 2010, that we had agents specifically work only in specific geographic areas. So for example, I only worked in downtown Austin. So I learned all the buildings, I knew all the inventory, all of that. If someone wanted to buy a home or sell a home, let's just say in Round Rock, which is way north Austin, it's the suburbs. I've probably driven to Round Rock twice in my life. I wouldn't even consider working with the client in Round Rock because I know nothing about Round Rock. So what I would do is I would then refer that to the expert agent that we had in Round Rock at the time. So these kinds of things people I think are generally starting to talk about now, but we were practicing them already, probably 10 years ago.
Yeah. I love that tactic of you're basically like building community. That's what you're doing.
Yes.
Yeah, like you're creating this, I would say, local star power within the real estate agent, whatever local area that they were targeting. You're not only standing out as like the local expert, literally. It's not just a phrase that you're putting on business cards anymore. It's like you guys were literally knowing who exactly was selling what to who, and
Yeah.
and not only that, but then you were networking with the business owners, which then you said is actual business itself. These are people who buy and sell homes as well. And then I think on top of that is I love so obviously being in the marketing world, I love marketing tactics that it's like indirectly getting to our target audiences, because I know that I look up some of the NAR data quite often, and it said that on average, the average home buyer came from I believe it was like 15 to 20 miles away. And so, yeah. And so like knowing that that's like a city, that's like two cities, depending on where you're at,
Right.
you're moving. And so when you're moving into that city as a home buyer, the amenities are the businesses. It's like you think about the reason why somebody actually goes into a city, and it's like you think about the things they're going to do in that city, from hiking to wanting to see the local coffee shop or whatever it is as a family. And
Yes.
it's like, yeah. And so it's like being the I would say being the media of that as a real estate agent, I could see how it builds, not only builds brand, but then again, it adds to that local expertise of the real estate agent. That's
Right.
quite interesting.
I think it's even more now because often when someone's coming to a new city, they have the ability to do so much research on their own online because there's so much great information now. But when it comes down to, okay, I want to relocate to this neighborhood, let's just say, generally speaking, what is it that I need to know specifically about that neighborhood that is not online? And that's where I think that the buyer's agent in particular, can demonstrate value, that, because, we're talking a lot about value prices and all of this with the buyer agency and everything. I'd say this too, because I don't want to forget to say this all in the context of macro and microeconomics too, right? I think this is the other thing with agents to be successful these days, is understanding, and maybe this is where I think brokerages and the company that you're with can be helpful, or your affiliated partners. I think it's really important to have strong affiliated partners, not just for the sake of referring business, but for the sake of knowing like what is fundamentally going on that could potentially impact you as a buyer or agent or a seller agent. So I think this is where it gets complicated, is how do you know what's going on in the macroeconomics of the market that could potentially be impacting you, number one, so that you need to be aware of that. Because one thing I always found with working with buyers and sellers is when I could speak what was going on to the national, if I could speak to what was going on in the national market, and then I could speak to what was going on in the local market, and then I could nail down, okay, so all that's great. I'm knowledgeable about these things. And now let me tell you that, like, I know the 5 business owners here, being aware of what is going on in those markets is important.
Yeah, 100%.
Macro, micro.
100%. It reminds me of a conversation that I was having with it was a security guard. and he's like, I see him. So I go to a local coffee shop in my area, and I see him walking around all the time. And we're doing a ton of building in our area. And they just reopened the train station, and they're building a bunch of restaurants and shops around it.
That's
And
awesome.
so, yeah. And so I was sitting there, and I used to take walks on my breaks. And so I was listening to a podcast, and I seen him. I just started a conversation with him. And then he started telling me everything that was going into those shops. And I was like, I was just thinking as a real estate agent, and I was like, if I had that information, I would be wanting to talk to the businesses that are soon going to be in those new locations. I would be wanting to talk to, I don't know who would be in charge of it. Maybe it's somebody within the city council, I believe, whoever's in charge of development, because they probably know they gave all the permits to the businesses that are going in there.
Yes,
And so,
that's so
yeah,
smart.
yeah. And just being the person to, I mean, it's easier with our phone, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, all those,
It is.
platforms. It's easier to get the message out there of like, hey, did you guys know what's about to be here? Because everybody drives in, all the locals, they know, they're driving by it all the time. And everybody's wondering, like, it's like, we see them building, but what is it? And so it's like being that real estate agent to be able to give those answers to the local community. It's like that there's value.
Yeah,
And so, yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's
Instead,
fast.
and yeah, it's a lot more valuable than sending. And forgive me if you've done this, Kelly. I just,
I
I'm
would like to say no, but I'll wait and see what you say.
okay. No, just because I see it, and then I also see like these so-called gurus talking about how, oh, it's our best performing marketing tactics, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around how and why. The flyers where they're sending recipes to, homeowner, and in my mind, I'm like, you guys are professionals that sell one of the most high ticket items to the everyday consumer. And it's
You know
like,
what
we're not chefs, we're not
I
cooks, we're
think
not.
that, you know where I think that comes from?
Mm,
It comes from a period of time when marketing was not so specific, and the way that we delivered it was not in this method. So I think that there was one juncture in a time period and era long ago that the philosophy is, if you send someone something, it's really all just about them remembering you. It kind of doesn't matter what you send them. But with the internet, I think that as more and more the internet became sophisticated, the consumer has become more sophisticated. And so then that doesn't match or align at all. And that's not actually how it works, is people don't just remember you because you send them something, even if it's a recipe or something. So I think it came from somewhere, but it just hasn't been re-examined, which I think that's like such an important thing, is to constantly be like, okay, why are we doing this? What is the purpose? Do we have data that supports it? Is it really just that we need to do, I mean, a 33 touch or an 8x8 or whatever? I just feel like things have become so much more sophisticated that the consumer is the one driving it.
Yep, 100%. 100%.
Yeah, I've never
That,
did recipe cards or the calendars, but you know what, it's funny, I don't know that I would have, because it's just kind of not who I am.
mhm.
But I do think that if I remember, since I've been in this business for a long time, I think that like it served its purpose at one point, but it's just been, I think there's something that's more productive now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I was I was just thinking to myself. I even asked my because when I come across this stuff, I was like, does that work? Like, I understand the intention of the real estate agent where I'm trying to stay in front of them, but in
Yeah.
my mind, I'm like, there's so many pieces of value from everything that we just talked about, amenities in the city, home maintenance. There's so many other pieces of value that it's like you can't think of that stuff that actually has to do with either the equity in the home, maintenance of the home, amenities in your city. Like you can't think of anything else besides like recipes that you probably even you probably just Google a recipe lasagna and then put it on your 4th of July card and then
Well, and what's an interesting conversation. You probably have a lot of information on this, Cameron, but what I find most interesting now, if I were building a real estate practice right now, is the intersection with the evolution of tech, that companies are now able to better pinpoint based on a consumer's buying behavior, not in the real estate space, but like there's data now what consumers are buying that is an indication of a potential buying signal of a home or selling of a home. And we're now at the place where there's technology that can tell us like, okay, this potential buyer or seller, they are consuming these different things in this way. And so we think they're going to buy or sell a home in the next X period. And then once we know that data, then Cameron, you with your marketing brain and your marketing company is like, okay, what should we be doing to attract those people? So you can just get more and more targeted. So where I would want to be going is like, how do we get those people? Because this gets me very excited because, in 2010, when we were doing this, we didn't have that data. But if we had that data now, I'd be creating structure around like, how do we empower our agents to really hone in on those people?
100%, 100%. That's you get me excited, Kelly. My like marketing, my marketing brain is going because literally today I did that. I texted my mom and I was asking her because obviously she's bought and sold a couple of homes in her lifetime,
Yeah.
and so I was just asking her about experiences that she has, and she told me about her real estate agents sent her something very interesting that got her attention. And I was like, as a marketer, I always love, listening to things like that. And so like, I was like, what is it? And she showed me it was a software that the real estate agent was leveraging, third-party software. And it was basically a home maintenance software. And so it kept track of the equity in the home. It kept track of the, what's it called? It gave you like reminders of like, hey, remember to check your AC. It's hot in the summer. Make sure to, this and that. Yeah. And it also gave recommendations of local experts that are like plumbers, pool cleaners, lawn service, things of that nature. And so, and then the other interesting part is like all the documentation that comes along with your home has that in there as well. And
Wow.
so, yes. And so, yeah. And so as soon as she sent me that, I was like, send me the link. Like, what is it? And I was playing around with it. And I was like, I would have a field day marketing this if I was a real estate agent, because that's actually something of value that got engagement from my mom.
Yes,
And so, yeah, and I was like, oh my gosh. And so I just I'm a little like Gary Keller, where I have like literally a drawer full of journals, and it's just drawings of marketing, anything business, from operations to product development to everything. And so I just started a whole page of what I would do if I was a real estate agent, because I'm going to give it, and I'm probably going to deploy it. I actually like told one of my brokers, that I work with, I was like, hey, once we get to the stage where we start working with, where we start going to consumers, because I'm helping them with recruiting right now. But I was like, once we get to marketing for your consumers, I was like, dude, I have a really, in my opinion, effective marketing campaign that delivers value to the specifically sellers that have 50% or more equity in their home. And so, yeah. And so when you say that we have access to more data on buying behavior today more than ever because of the internet, it's like us marketers, it's like we're like, licking our chops when we see all these technologies, because we're like, wait, I can get what? Like, oh my God. And then we start thinking about all the copyright and messaging and ad creative, and we start thinking about all of that.
That's so great. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
And
they need people like you, but I think that's where it's very interesting times to be able to help real estate agents or even loan officers to be able to target, market. And I don't know how you would do it, right? Because once that data comes in the hands of everyone, then you still have to have a differentiator, to your point, to get their attention.
Yeah.
But that's really interesting to me, is like, how do you capture business in a new way?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I'm constantly asking that question, and but you said it. What the core of it is, it's staying in touch with human behavior and how they consume, and
Yeah.
that's it. And I think, I mean, back in the day, it was where everybody's attention was radio and TV ads, well, TV and newspaper, and now their attention just shifted over to our phone, basically, and everything that's in our phone. And
Right.
so,
I
yeah.
think I think that's why sometimes industries might get stuck, because they think of the consumer in their ecosystem the way that it's been, But when we raise our head and we look at the consumer and how they're, and we don't even have to look, I mean, we are the consumer. I mean, maybe I'm a little bit older than other people, but I mean, I'm right in there with everyone else. I want things delivered to me the way that I want them. I want them to be customized. I want it to be fast. I want it to be on my phone. And so we already know what consumers want because we are consumers. So we have to use that in our minds to think about, like, how do we help the agent take care of the consumer, and how is that consumer shifting, and what do we need to be thinking about in the future as an industry to be able to also then help the broker, help the agent, help the consumer, right? Like, I feel like it's a triad of, of support to the consumer. And I think there's often a missing conversation in our industry about the consumer, but it's for the sake, in my mind, of helping the agent help the consumer, and helping the broker help the agent helping the consumer, and then that kind of a thing.
Yeah, 100%. The ecosystem you can definitely get lost in.
Yeah.
Yeah. So going back to your story,
Okay.
yeah, sorry. No, I love how we went off on that tangent because yeah, I love it. So you went back to being a real estate agent, and then built the brokerage that you built in the Austin, Texas area.
Yep.
And then that's when you went now back into corporate world. Yes.
So
Go ahead.
I had a great opportunity to go work for Better Homes and Gardens Real Estate with Sherry Chris, who many people know. And at the time it was Reengineering. It's now the Anywhere brand. And so I spent a couple of years there building their national, I was the national director of talent attraction. And so building the programs for their broker owners to be able to recruit more agents and retain more agents. And so really helping them build their platform. And I did that for several years, and then ended up back in Austin, back in the mortgage business for 5 years. And then launched the executive recruiting company for T360. And so I've been doing that for the past 4 years. And now I've started my own executive consulting practice.
Nice. Very cool.
Yeah.
Man, it's you literally like it's no, like your knowledge of real estate, like I can just see like I really feel, and you said it, like it's like, it was intentional, everything that you were doing. You went from building businesses to working in the business to get a better experience of basically to widen your view of how a real estate agent and a real estate broker and how consumers are consuming and behaving. And then you went into the mortgage world. And so it's like, geez, it's like your resume is beautiful.
Oh, thanks. Well, the mortgage thing is, I've kind of been in and out of mortgage before, but this last round in the mortgage space, I was really more in the nitty gritty of understanding how the economics work for a branch in the mortgage industry, and because we were in an expansion mode of growing outside of the state of Texas, and how do you do that? So that was a recruiting piece. But for that period of time, because we were integrating new branches, I really got deep into mortgage in a way that I hadn't before, in terms of understanding the numbers in it, like how do the BIPs work, and how does the compensation work, and how do the commissions work, and how does underwriting work, and like really have a pretty deep understanding of that. It's a complicated business. It really is. And so I've had a great opportunity to be in very large national structures, and then in small local startups, and from agent to mortgage to executive recruiting. And so I've had a great run of different experiences that I can now bring to the table to a new audience, I think.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, 100%. It gives you you're well-rounded, I think in the knowledge needed in order to do what you do at a high level. And so, shifting gears a little bit, Kelly.
Yeah.
I know when we were talking on the phone, we were talking about I would say like a very big issue in the real estate industry, specifically for, and this is what I'm very curious in asking you. I don't know if it's for brokers, or I don't know if it's an agent issue or a broker or a broker issue. But the issue around agent production, and I think the core issue is around onboarding and making sure that agents actually onboard to production. And there's a timeline around that. And there's and there's actual focus around the structure around agents once they get into a brokerage, so they end up hitting their goals and exceeding their goals. When were you first introduced to that problem?
Well, I was clearly introduced to it at Keller Williams.
Mm-hmm.
And then deeply personally introduced to it in our residential real estate brokerage. And then as an executive recruiter, working a lot with brokerages, I saw a breakdown in onboarding. So I might find someone really great and a company would hire them, and then they would go into kind of what I like to call no man's land, because whether it's an agent or it's a staff person, onboarding is critical. And I love to use the word, I don't know that everyone loves this, but the word I like is integration, because, you know, onboarding, I don't know, first of all, it's not very sexy. Not that integration is sexier, but but I feel like it really is about, if you're integrated and you're aligned, then people are going to perform better. They're going to stay. Everyone's going to be happier, right? So it's like an integrative approach to people, right? And I think the reason that it's an issue, or maybe a challenge is a better way to say it versus an issue, is, I'm just going to say it like, it doesn't seem easy, and it can be easy. Maybe it's simple but not easy. You know how that phrase is. But I'll just say this one thing that I can tell you right now: if you get a great onboarding integration process in, your business is gonna be so much better and actually more efficient than if you don't do it. Like, it might seem like a headache at the beginning, but I can tell you it makes everything so much better in the long run. So it's like practically thinking about, okay, how do we set this up at the beginning so that our best asset, I mean, think about it. The craziness of all this is like, how much time, energy, resources, and money do we think and talk and spend about recruiting? Every conversation, people want to talk about recruiting, and they want to talk about retention and and then they don't have the fundamental systems from the front end that basically help manage what they need. And listen, I'm a super fast-paced person, and I'm not the most detailed person. So I understand that, like, oh, okay, you know, I really don't want to do it. But I've also learned that if you set up something right, it's going to totally leverage you, right? It's leads, listing, leverage. Like, everything's about leverage, whether it's people, tools, systems. And I know clearly I'm passionate about this, but I mean, it's other than recruiting, it's probably the most important thing that you can do.
Yeah.
I get off track.
No, I love it, because I think you're hitting the no, I love it. Because I think you're hitting the nail on the head. Like, it's interesting. I had this conversation with Diana and Amy. I think I talked to them both about it.
Probably. Amy's great at onboarding.
Yeah. And it's just, I don't know, like, because when I came into the industry, like, it didn't take long for me to understand, like, there's a problem here, there's a challenge here, you know, for brokers. And you know, I started looking at the data, I started talking to real estate agents and things of that nature, and I'm like, it doesn't make sense. Like, I was talking to a team leader of a KW in up north, and I asked him, I said, how many agents do you have? And he's like, we have about 200. And I was like, okay. And I was like, that's good. And I was like, how many of them, like, out of curiosity, are capping every year? And he was like, he said 20. Well, he didn't specify how many are capping, but he said 25% of them are producing. And so I was like, that's interesting. And then you think about, so I have lots of friends in the corporate world. I have friends that work at Salesforce, Oracle, HubSpot, all those big companies.
Yeah.
And they're like, in my mind, I'm like, could you imagine having a sales team of 200 people and only 25% of them are hitting quota? Like that, it just doesn't make sense to me. And then that's when I start to question even more. I'm like, okay, well, why? Like, why is it? His answer was ego. He's in a market where real estate agents, 5 transactions, you're doing 6 figures a year. And he's like, they hit that. They don't want to go to training anymore. They don't want to go to, they don't want to like I said, they don't want to get trained anymore. They don't want to do anymore. And they're good. They're content. And he said a lot of them are, some of them are part-time real estate agents, hairstylists. And they're like, yeah, I hear real estate ever so often with some of my clients when I'm cutting their hair or whatever, go get their license. It's such an interesting, it's such an interesting challenge. And you would think it was so easy as like, well, just make sure that there's structure with the agents. But then that's when I get kickback from brokers and they're like, well, no, like we can't force contractors what to do.
Yeah.
And so that's where it's different.
Part of it.
Yeah.
And, I mean, I'll just say this, that I recently saw the numbers that, and this still boggles my mind, but this speaks to him that, and this was, I want to say it was the same a decade ago, which is the top 5% of real estate agents in our market produce 6 million or higher. So 6 million producers or less are, the bottom 95%. And so I think it's, there's a lot of ways to look at it. First is, I mean, the barriers to entry, anyone can kind of get in. And
Yeah.
so I feel like that, in another generation as well, like part-time agents actually could still be competent to take care of buyers and sellers. But with the complications and how complex the market is and how the consumer is used to a certain level of competence, that it's really hard for a part-time agent who's only doing a couple of deals a year to actually fully take care of a consumer to the way in which they want to be taken care of, if you will. I mean, I'll just say this one thing is, and in our brokerage, we were so small that we were a little microcosm, and we really proved out that we would hire. So what we did is we went out and we hired people from other sales organizations that were already producing in top 5% sales in other industries. And our premise was kind of to what you were saying, which, they've already been trained in sales and they have to sit at a desk and they have to produce and they're being held accountable or they get fired. So when we would bring them in, they were already used to working and producing and sitting at a desk and doing all that. So I think it's, and I say all that it's like, I think that there's a specific person that's going to be more successful in the business. And I think they have to want it and they have to be willing to be trained and to be like, I accept that you're telling me these are the best practices. And so I'm going to do them. I know you can't force me to do them because I'm a 1099, but I think it's the right human that's going to do that. And there's a lot of people that are attracted to this industry because they want autonomy and they want freedom and they want all those things, which so do I. And I totally love that about our industry. And we also need people that are willing to learn and listen and engage and take best practices and implement them for the sake of their career and the sake of the consumer. Because, I would just say this, and I mean, people might get really mad at me, but I kind of think if you don't make 6 figures in this business, it's just almost too hard to do it, and even 6 figures is questionable, And so I want you to make money. I want you to make good money so that you then can take care of the consumer in a way that takes care of them. And then it helps me as a broker. It helps us as an industry. If we're all professionals.
Yep.
And what we know is that there are fundamentals in sales and lead generation and business and all of those things that are going to help someone be successful if they sit down at the desk and do them. And if they're willing, and if we are willing as brokers or companies or MLSs to help those broker agents, help the agents do their jobs. I don't know. And maybe I'm off track, but.
No, 100%. I love talking through it because again, like when we were talking on the phone, like uh, I'm very intrigued by problem solving.
Yes,
Excuse
me
me.
too.
Yeah. And in order to solve a problem, you have to completely understand the problem and the root causes of it and what it's impacting in the business or for a person, whatever it may have you. And so I love like this talk, just talking through it. And so, because even if we don't see it, like maybe somebody watching this, they'd be like,
Oh,
oh, whoa, that was the final piece to me completely understanding it. And then they're going to start building something, which is great. And so, do you like, who does it start with, Kelly? Like, um, do you think it's the broker's responsibility to make sure that agents are producing, or is it just, hey, agents are going to come in, some are going to produce, some aren't, and that's just how it is?
well, it goes back to, I think it's a partnership.
Mm,
I don't know. I mean, I think the broker is the logical one to help the agent. But I also understand how the numbers work and the compression and the, the margin compression that everyone is under. But it's like it's a loop that's happening, because if we don't have brokers that help with agents so that the agents can clearly articulate their value proposition and then live it and breathe it, then they continue to get reduced commissions, which then is like this loop of then the broker has less margin to then help them. And so it's like that weird cycle of money that exists
yeah.
in terms of running businesses.
Mhm.
So I think it's the onus is on both parties, really. But ultimately, in the end, if you think about it, I don't know how you feel, Cameron. I'm all about personal responsibility.
Yeah.
So for me, in the end, I feel like let's hire people who have personal responsibility, that understand what the consumer wants, help them try to understand what their value is, and then let's help them go do that. And let's not worry about the ones that aren't going to do it, because that's almost like negative ROI or diminishing returns at some point, because the person doesn't want to do it. And I
Yep.
mean, we can also pretend, that's not the right word. It's really easy to feel like you're busy and you're doing things, but you're not doing things that are going to produce what you need to produce. And I think that's a whole nother story, and that's harder. I mean, I'm not saying that's an easy thing,
Mm-hmm.
but
Yeah.
do you know what to do? Do you know how to do it? And then do you do it?
Yes, 100%. And it's interesting because I think the broker has the first two answers to that question,
Yeah.
those two questions. And then the do you do it is now on the agent's willingness to want to do all the stuff and leverage all the technology and all the trainings and the mentorship support and things of that nature. And so that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
I mean,
eh,
I would love to say it's just accountability, like sit down and let's do it, but it just doesn't.
mhm.
And I mean, listen, we could have a whole nother conversation about barriers to entry into our industry too, because it's like, well, gosh, maybe, but that's, that no one really even talks about that. So I think in the end, it's like, what do we do to help brokers, help agents do better business?
Yep.
For those who want it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so interesting. The reason why I even care so much about this challenge is because um, you see the domino effect or ripple effect. You see like when a broker let's just like, hypothetical world, broker's responsibility for, or matter of fact, let's do collaboration. It's a collaboration between broker and agent. Brokers providing all the tools, technology, training, support for real estate agent to be providing a high quality service to consumers. The reason why I care about it so much is, Kelly, I am dead serious. Like almost every single one of my family members and really good friends have had a less, I would say below par experience with real estate agents. And I see that this problem in the broker agent world is having an effect on the consumer experience.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm like, well, they deserve better. Like I don't think it's fair that, that one of my good friends, he potentially could have lost 20, 30, $40,000 on the sale of his home because he's working with one of those real estate agents who don't really show up, that I Kelly, I heard this multiple times, and it kind of like pissed me off to the point where I was like, what company is that? To where like I've seen it multiple times on the lending side where the lenders are going on vacation in the middle of escrow, and it's like hard to get in contact with them, and it's delaying the process. And I'm like,
Yeah,
who are these people? Like, what are they doing?
well, that's even worse on the lender side because they're employees. So you could just call the lender. But yeah, and it's a compounded effect too, because I know you've been an agent. Like when I was an agent, I was like, I'm doing the job of the other agent too most of the time. But I think this is where, when we started our brokerage, we started it because of this exact thing, which was if we went into a real estate office in Austin, Texas, and we walked in the door and we said, I need to buy and sell a house, it would be a complete crapshoot as to whether we would get a good agent or not. And so this is where we got compelled to try to build our brokerage, because honestly, I get better service at Starbucks. I mean, I know we all like our local coffee houses, but I know what I'm going to get. It doesn't matter what Starbucks I go to. And so consumers want consistent, confident, that's a lifestyle brand. And so this is fundamentally, I think, the issue, that we can't not tell people to work in the same form or fashion in a residential real estate office. And so you can't provide to the consumer a consistent experience because you can't tell them what to do.
Yep. 100%.
That's what we were trying to do in our brokerage. And we actually did fairly well. Now, we were very small. And if we had been bigger, we probably would have gotten in trouble, because I would imagine that you can't be that prescriptive. And so I don't know. What do you think? I mean, I think that when it comes down to it, it's fundamentally you can't prescribe to the agent what they can do with the consumer, which if you could and they did it, we already know what that might look like that could be successful.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I believe with the knowledge you have and the experience you have, along with, I'm pretty sure majority of people in your network, if you were to go into a brokerage and then, re-engineer everything in order for agent production to go through the roof, it would. But then, and this is where I don't understand like the legalities, and like how much you can control as a broker. And I was speaking to a couple of brokers, and they said that they can like fire real estate agents. Like they can And so like, that's where I was like, okay, well then you're going to have to play in this gray area of a combination of incentivizing them and reprimanding them for not following structure within this corporation, in order for them to have that Starbucks effect, where it's like, no matter what KW they go to, they're getting a really, high grade professional that knows everything about anything in order to get you moving to where you need to go. And so
people are too scared, because brokers are scared, rightfully scared, to just think about it this way. Depending on what your model is, let's just say in a capped commission model, that I think some brokers are scared because they have agents that are not capping, that are paying them either fees or something like that. And so they are making money on those agents, even though they're not doing a lot of transactions. So I think sometimes they get stuck in this, like, okay, well, I have 100 agents that aren't capping, but I'm making money on them. And so then that affects their financial situation. And then the other piece of it is, if they let agents go, they're worried about the other agents leaving. So there's a lot of fear-based, there's some fundamental things that are tied, I think, to the way some things are economically set up in the businesses, like with sometimes. And then I think there's fear-based. People don't want to let agents go because they're afraid. And so that's a whole thing, I think.
Yeah. It's quite interesting, because and please correct me if I'm wrong, I think if you helped a real estate agent succeed, I think that would have a good effect. It would be a really good indicator for increasing in retention and acquisition. Because real estate agents, I know they all go to events and they all talk to each other. And if one year they go to an event and they're making $40,000 a year, next year they come and they're making 175,000,
Absolutely.
everybody's going to start asking them, what are you doing?
Yep.
And so, yeah. And obviously they're going to be like, well, hypothetically, I'm at, KW. I got this training. I got this support. It's amazing. You should come over if you ever think about it. They don't even need to know how to recruit to bring them over because the results are going to speak for itself. And so, and then when it comes to retention, I haven't looked at the data on this, but like when it comes to retention, I think that you would retain somebody that, you would increase the retention rates. So basically you would lower your turn rates if you did that for a real estate agent. And so my idea, like, so now coming over to the solution, like how I would think about it is, it's like, I would get with someone like you who completely understands the world of onboarding, talent acquisition, and just getting someone to produce at a high level. And I would bring all of your knowledge into a brokerage, and then I would put that structure in play based on the agent persona. And so is it a real estate agent that does have that entrepreneurial blood, which I feel like 90% of them don't, and that's okay because they don't need to.
Yeah.
They're going to have their own structure. And now as a broker, my responsibility is to make the decision. Do we want to stay only hiring entrepreneurial type real estate agents? If so, what's the personality that comes along with that? What's all that? Yeah. What's all that data that comes along with that type of agent? Or do we want to just open the brokerage up to any type of agent? And if so, then me, Kelly, I would take the responsibility of building that structure for each type of agent, which there's not many. And so I feel like there's the team agent that just wants to be a buyer agent, just wants to be a listing agent. They're good. They're making their money. They're okay with the 50-50 splits. They're all good with all that. And then you have what I attended oh, wow. He was actually from KW too. I attended a webinar where this guy was talking about, I think he was coaching on the buying and building of brokerages. And yeah. And so he went over the 3 types of agent personas, and he called them there's an interdependent real estate agent. And this is the one that's like, they tolerate the business activities to build a real estate business, but they don't really like doing them. But they know, like, in order for me to hit my numbers, I just have to do them. And so they're more customer focused. They're more like, I want to provide a white glove service. And so, yeah, I would provide structure for each one of those agents to succeed. And to the point to where I know if they're not succeeding, it's not us, it's them. And then I would make the decision, do we want to keep those people or do we want to let them go?
Yeah.
And so, yeah. And then with that structure, Kelly, I am dead serious. I would probably be like, I think his name's Mauricio at the agency. Yes. I was listening to one of his, I think he was one of the hosts. He was one of the guests on Inman, I think one of their conferences. Yes.
I think it was too, yeah.
He said something in 2019, 2020. I believe he said he had around 100 agents in the LA area, and they made up 17% of the market share of the transactions in LA. And I was like, he's doing something correct, right? And so and the reason why I bring him up is because the result of that is market share. The result of providing that structure for each one of the real estate agents within a brokerage is making up market share. And you just increase transaction volume, which then increases the margins, like the gross margins per agent in your brokerage. It's just, in my eyes, I'm like, there's no negative here. And so it's like, and then I get to the point to where then I look at brokerages and I'm like, why aren't they doing that? What's preventing them from doing that? And I think, and give me your thoughts on this. I think the easy route of just sticking to recruiting in order to stay profitable is in the way of doing that. Mm-hmm.
You laid it out nicely. I accept your premise. I do. And I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to formulate my thought about it. There's so many dynamics that impact the doing of that. It seems like exactly what you said is exactly how it should it should be.
Yeah.
And yet think about this, there's so many different markets that people are in, and there's so many different models, right? So when you get into kind of the nitty gritty of looking at our brokerage finances and you see where the money is, and you have to really understand how the compensation plans impact the operation. I mean, it's so many factors. What you're saying, I think most people would agree with. I mean, you and I have talked all around, not around it. We've been talking to it from the very beginning, which is the consumer is driving this. The consumer wants their Starbucks, for lack of better words. They have for a decade. Since 2010, I was like, I get a better experience getting my coffee than I do like my doctor or like whomever. But for sure, I think in real estate too, which is just, you're like, wow, okay, let's try to remedy it. But then, maybe it's a little bit like there's, antiquated systems and solutions and things like that that are also getting in the way. Not to mention the fact that we're now in this loop of, comes kind of from a value crisis that people, because of the internet and the fact that they can get so much data, there's a lot of pressure on the agents who now are not able to speak or act. So it's not just saying what your value proposition is. We all know that. In the end, it's, can you demonstrate what you're doing for the value? And I mean, it's interesting. I recently saw someone who they're putting together it's a new technology company. And I think it's brilliant because it basically has found a way to automate everything like a buyer agent and seller agent does, literally with the buyer and seller. And so in its purest form, when you kind of see on paper what a buyer agent actually does for a buyer and what a seller agent actually does for a seller, that's not just put it on Zillow, it is really mind-boggling. But you can't just speak it, number one. And then number two, we're only right now in the space of the intersection of the technology to actually be able to automate and generate something out to the buyer and seller that shows, I spent 180 hours showing you property. I spent, or I spent 200 hours and here's the 20 things that I did. We wrote 5 contracts, like if you could literally quantify every single solitary minute of time that you spent with the buyer or seller and like regurgitate it back to them, then they might go, oh, okay. But in the absence of that, it's all words. And so they don't know that you stayed up until 2 a.m. talking to the title company and the mortgage company. And they don't know that you basically had to do 5 things for the agent on the other side to get the deal done. Like, these are the kinds of things that I think are coming down the pipe with technology that can change everything for some of the buyers and sellers to be able to more quantify in a way, which then that helps with the commission pressure, which might help with the margin pressure. And I'm sort of talking around our question, but I think it starts there.
Yes.
And then I think, to your point, it starts with, like the agency. I know Jim Ramsey there, and he's brilliant. I think that, I don't know exactly when Mauricio hired him, probably at least 5 years ago. But I think it's a philosophy of quality agents that are taking care of the customer. It's not quantity. We can say all that, it's a bunch of words, but like, is it like, what are they really doing to produce that? Because I think they are producing it.
Yeah, 100%.
That was a lot of words for me.
No, I love it. And this could be the last thing that I say about it before we go on to the next topic. But it's interesting that exactly what you're saying is like the core of it is, how do you optimize the client experience? And as you were talking, like obviously the finances, the brokerage, it has to make sense. In my opinion, I think there's enough spread in the real estate transaction to accomplish this. But again, like all of the affiliates that are involved in a transaction, all the technology that's involved in the transaction, all of the operations and logistics of actually physically moving someone from one place to another. Obviously there's lots of things in that world. And so like what I got, like to sum it up from you, in order to optimize that experience for the buyer and seller, it's going to take a combination of a highly trained real estate agent. You have to innovate the agent along with the technology who's with, yeah, that's also being innovated.
Yeah,
And so
like
because
that.
the technology is being innovated at a very fast pace, especially with the AI.
Yeah.
And I think by not helping a real estate professional, you're giving them too much. You're giving them too big of a task that's way outside of their scope of work.
Yeah.
And so, because they're now, I mean, I see it all the time. I'm in the real estate agent groups on Facebook and things like that. And they're like, how do we compete with Zillow? How do we compete with Redfin? How do we do it? And it's like, one, you're supposed to be working with them. That's a new technology that's out. That's improving the experience of a buyer and seller. And so you're supposed to be working with it, leverage it. And so, but again, it's like just them asking that question shows me that it's like, well, now you're getting outside of your scope of work. And this is where the broker comes into play, to where they need to pick up the pace and then train the agents to innovate them to now work in congruency with, I would say, buyer demand, if you will.
Yeah.
Yes. And so that's my best way of summing that up. Now, if you go down to the agent training, the innovation of the agent part, I feel like that's where you, Diana, Amy, this is where all you guys come into play. And and you all know how to, if I could, Kelly, if I could, I would love, I know you guys are having a webinar, live webinar, September 13th. Yeah, everybody stay tuned for that. I will probably put links to that in the description on YouTube and everywhere I post this. But it would be so interesting to get all three of you in a room and be like, all right, what exactly is a problem? Let's look at all of the variables. And then, especially like, I believe in the corporate world, it's called a war room. That's when you guys are like strategizing. Yeah. And so basically get in a war room with you and anybody else that, anybody like, so like all of the, I just call them geniuses, all of the geniuses that know the knowledge on every variable that goes into a brokerage to make sure it's profitable, to make sure all that good stuff. It'd be so fascinating to throw that problem on the desk for you guys and just watch what comes out of your guys' brains. Like like, I think you guys would come up with something, I would say revolutionary, not even, you wouldn't even be, I would say revolutionary, to where it'd be a completely separate business model, completely separate splits, and it would all evolve around the consumer experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. And knowing how to leverage agents and
I'm
tech.
just going to talk about that now. Yeah. That's just in my brain. I'm thinking about this whole way that you said to innovate the agent. And then, your thing about the agent's comment about Zillow is, I just keep having this thought in my mind, like an MBA. Like, I think that when I hear that specific thing, Zillow as a reference, then I want to know, do you actually know what Zillow does? And do you know how it impacts you? Do you know what you do that impact? I mean, and because I think sometimes what happens is we just hear things like the media, like it's a big bad wolf. Yep. So, okay, so I think, maybe the time and place for the big bad wolf is way gone. So what do we need to know about Zillow so that you know how to handle Zillow? So to me, I kind of go, is that a knowledge gap? Because if you can't explain the main players in our industry and you're an agent, then maybe we need an MBA. right? Because I do think that because the consumer's driving this kind of thing, if it wasn't for this, it wouldn't matter. But the consumer is becoming more and more sophisticated because they have access to data. So if we don't fundamentally understand how things work and be able to explain it, then we can say things that might indicate that we don't know what we're exactly doing. I find this often weirdly, I talk to people and, I don't know about you, I operate my business in the cloud. I have since 2010, basically. And I talk to people and I'll say something to them and I can tell right away they actually do not understand fundamentally how a cloud works. And so you don't realize that if you don't know how that works, you can make a lot of mistakes and you can say things to people that they look at you. You wouldn't even know that I knew that you don't know the cloud, but what you said makes me realize that you don't know how to use the cloud. And then I freak out because I'm like, who doesn't know how the cloud works?
Yeah.
So it's a little bit like that, and that, it comes, I'm on a little bit on a tangent here, but I really believe in being a business professional. So innovating the agent, how do we get agents to be like, let me learn every single thing I can? And we have a ton of agents we do. We're totally overgeneralizing here. We have a ton of agents that are business professionals. So what you and I are talking about is like, how do we empower the ones that are either coming into this business that we know should be awesome? We have a whole new generation of real estate agents that we need to support that have never been in a market other than the one that we're in right now. And can you imagine, can you even imagine this kind of support that they need? And also we're in an era of change and very rapid change, and that is not going to change. That's how it's going to be. And so how do we produce environments for our agents to be able nimbly to adjust? Because their job is way too complicated. I can't even fathom what they've been through in the last 3 years with the way that it's been. They can barely keep up with the offers. And so it's like, how do we work in this current environment? Because the change pace is, and we're coming up on a lot of changes in the next couple of months. We don't know what kind of changes are going to hit us. So how do we help brokers? Help the agent. That was another tangent, I think.
Yeah, no, I love it. I think to some, my final word on it is, I always use this analogy. Are you familiar with the sport, Formula One, the racing?
Yes, and my husband's a race car driver.
Oh, really?
Amateur race car driver. So yes, I'm very familiar with Formula One. I love me some Lewis Hamilton.
Nice. That's so cool. So I always use a Formula One example to describe the real estate industry right now, and how the relationship between broker and agent, to where agents act as the racers, the actual drivers, and then brokers are acting as the brands, Mercedes, Ferraris. And it's like an agent comes into the game. They let's assume that they're really good at driving. And, that means that, they've been trained, they know how to handle a client, et cetera, et cetera. And they are looking for a team to race for. And the brand, let's say, speaking of Lewis Hamilton, he goes to Mercedes and he's like, I want to race for you guys. It seems like the right fit. Mercedes is like, great. We have the best in technology. We have the best tires. We have the best engines. We have the best, whatever it is. We got a physical health coach over there, nutrition, this, that. We have all that good stuff. And he's like, all right, cool. Sounds good. Gets onto the team. And then he's like in the garage and he's like, where's my car? And Mercedes is like, you have to build it. Like, what do you mean? God. Where's your car? Yeah. And he's like, wait, how am I supposed to build the car? Like, do I have to maintain the car too? And they're like, yeah. And so it's like, you're your pit crew, you're this. If you need a pit crew, if you start winning races, go hire a pit crew. And so it's like, what they're doing is, yes, they have all the best in technology. They have all the best. This is the brands. This is the big, all the big real estate brands that we know of. They have all the best in technology. They have all the best training, support, and everything. But what they're doing is they're making the agents build the cars themselves and then go race. And so in my mind, I've always questioned, like, what would it look like if you already had a souped up car ready for that, ready for that driver. And on top of that, you were making sure that that driver was increasing their lap speeds every single day. And that's like the best analogy that I have to describe what's happening in the industry right now. And yeah, and that's like I said, I use that analogy all the time to really get an understanding of that broker and agent relationship. And I think I really believe, Kelly, somebody's going to come along. Somebody's probably doing it right now.
They are. They're going
And
to.
they're just changing the business model. And it might be EXP, might be one of those other, broker. Somebody's doing it right now as we're talking,
Yep.
and they see what we see, and they're like, something needs to change for the consumer's sake. And so let's go. And so, yeah,
Totally agree.
it's very
Totally
interesting.
agree.
Um,
It is, because now is the time. A decade ago, we were already talking about it, but the tech didn't exist. Now it does. You're right. It's coming. And
Yeah.
we don't know who it's going to be, but I think that it is fundamentally going to happen because the consumer is demanding it.
Yep, 100%, 100%.
And I love that analogy. It's great. It's perfect. It's actually what we want to happen that isn't happening.
Yes.
We want to be the Lewis Hamiltons in Mercedes or Max Verstappen in the Red Bull. I mean, that's what we want. And I love that. I love that analogy.